13-year-old Carrie Joe Peck went missing 33 years ago in 1982. She was last seen at a house party near her home in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Her body was discovered buried underneath the porch of an abandoned house 17 months later. The murder went unsolved until now. 50-year-old Jose Ferreira called a local news station and confessed to the crime. He apparently described the crime in grisly detail. The news director of the station only released the shortened version of Ferreira's confession to the public. Ferreira was 17 at the time and was trying to force the 13-year-old girl into the basement so he could make out with her. Carrie Joe Peck resisted, and Ferreira threw the poor girl down the flight of stairs, thus breaking her neck. Ferreira then had sex with the girl's dead body and buried her under the porch, where she spent her next 2 birthdays. Ferreira continued to be friendly with the girl's mother, as he was a close neighbor. The station contacted police, and Ferreira has been arrested and is finally in custody after all these years. "35-year-old Minnesota resident Timothy Robert Steele was charged with second-degree murder after bludgeoning his 84-year-old grandmother to death with a hammer because she blew her nose at the dinner table. Steele also added that he was angry with his grandmother because she caused a hole in one of his jackets. On a side note, murders committed with a hammer are not that uncommon. An FBI report cites a study conducted from 2005 to 2011. More murders are committed with blunt objects like hammers and baseball bats than rifles. In 2005, 445 murders were committed with rifles, versus 605 with blunt objects. In 2006, 438 murders were recorded using rifles, while 618 were committed with hammers and bats. And so the list goes for every year of the study. In 2011, 323 murders were committed with a rifle, and 496 using hammers and clubs. In a province of Buenos Aires, Argentina, 25-year-old Leandro Acosta and 22-year-old Karen Klein were accused of murdering their parents, 54-year-old Ricardo Klein and Miriam Kowalczyk. Acosta and Klein were stepbrother and sister. They were also lovers. Karen Klein has been released by authorities because they are unable to prove her involvement in the actual murders. Her attorneys claim she only helped clean up the scene because she was afraid Acosta might kill her as well if she refused. Acosta admits to the killings and recounts his actions for police. He found his stepfather asleep in his underwear, and he shot the 54-year-old in the head. He felt a sexual gratification after he shot his stepfather, so he decided to have sex with his corpse. While in the middle of the vile act, his mother came home from dropping off his 11-year-old siblings from school. She yelled, "What have you done?" Acosta then turned the gun on his mother and repeatedly shot her until she was dead. He then beat the bodies, crushed the skulls, and he impaled his mother on a spike. Then he committed a lewd act over his mother's dead corpse. Acosta wasn't done with them by a long shot. It was at this point that Karen Klein helped her brother clean up. Acosta sliced pieces of flesh off of his stepfather, cooked it over a fire, and consumed them. He told authorities it was a pleasure to eat his stepfather. He added that he tasted like pork, a tad salty, but delicious. Acosta also had no remorse for slaying his 52-year-old mother, of whom he said, "She was a whore and a drunkard. I did justice my way." Acosta then cut up the bodies, fed some of the remains to the family dogs, and it attempted to burn the rest. Police were tipped off when a relative could not enter the house and phoned the police. Only parts of the bodies were recovered, including a piece of his stepfather's pelvic bone and a spine, which authorities discovered in a bucket. Police also found a good portion of human flesh that had already been prepared, ready for consumption. The rest of the remains were burned. After the murders, Acosta went to work and Klein went to her yoga class, as if nothing ever happened. After killing the couple, Acosta reported them to police as child molesters and attempted to file a restraining order. He later claimed that his parents were abusive to him. The two 11-year-old siblings are in social services custody because their two uncles did not wish to care for them. In San Francisco, police discovered a squatter who had been residing in an empty mansion that had been up for sale. The house lies in affluent Pacific Heights neighborhood and is priced at $17 million. 38-year-old Jeremiah Kaylor was found in the home after police received a suspicious person report. Kaylor told police he was buying the home, but the real estate agent confirmed he was trespassing. The agent also told police that 11 paintings were missing from the home. Kaylor reportedly sold the paintings for $300,000 while he was staying in the vacant mansion. "30-year-old Tyrone Howard was charged with first-degree murder and first-degree robbery after he shot and killed New York Police Department officer Randolph Holder on Tuesday night in East Harlem. Howard was also wanted for the drug-related shooting death of a man on September 1st. Howard was able to evade police 10 times since then. Howard was apprehended around 9 p.m. on Tuesday evening. Holder, age 33, died in the hospital later that night. Howard had been engaged in a gun battle on a rooftop earlier and fled the scene. He robbed a bicycle off of a person passing by at gunpoint to make his escape. Officer Holder and his partner were dispatched to the scene. They approached Howard when he pulled out his gun and opened fire on the officers, hitting Holder in the head. Holder's partner, Officer Omar Walker, fired back and struck Howard in the leg. He was then taken into custody and sent to a nearby hospital to treat his wound. Howard had also been arrested back in 2009, along with another suspect in the shooting of an 11-year-old girl. In all, Howard had been arrested 28 times since he was 13. A criminal history which includes assault, robbery, criminal trespassing, conspiracy, lewdness, and 11 narcotics charges. He had been imprisoned in 2007 and 2013 for drug-related charges. In 2014, he was arrested along with 18 other individuals for drug dealing. Howard was enrolled in a drug diversion program instead of being sent to prison. NYPD Commissioner Bill Bratton stated, "If ever there's a candidate not to be diverted, it would have been this guy. He's a poster boy for not being diverted. His whole life has been about an escalation of crime." New York Mayor Bill de Blasio said in a press conference, "We are all in mourning tonight. This whole city is in mourning. We are mourning a man who gives his life as a guardian for all of us." Holder is the fourth NYPD officer killed in the last 10 months. Last December 20th, 2 officers were ambushed and murdered by Ismail Brinsley, who hated cops and was targeting them just for being police officers. Another officer was murdered in Queens on May 9th when he tried to question a suspect for suspicious behavior. "32-year-old Richard Dean DeFutis broke into a home in Portland, Oregon, and stole some valuables while the homeowners slept in their bed. Instead of leaving, DeFutis, who was armed with a knife, decided to take off his clothes and climb into bed with the couple. He sat on the man and he began to kiss him, which woke the victim up. The homeowner grabbed his gun as DeFutis pulled up his pants and ran. The owner fired at the intruder, but missed him as he escaped. DeFutis was apprehended in a vacant home a block away by police. He is charged with burglary, first-degree sex abuse, and unlawful use of a weapon. DeFutis had no prior criminal record. Arthur Lamondo was an ex-New York Police Department officer who had been fired because of mental health concerns back in 2004. Apparently, the department was correct to fire the 44-year-old Lamondo. Around 3:30 p.m. on a Thursday, he stabbed his ex to death with a machete inside her still-running black SUV. 48-year-old Suzanne Bardzell had taken out a restraining order against Lamondo. After slaying his ex, Lamondo leaped in front of a train in an attempt to kill himself about an hour later. Lamondo survived his jump in front of the train and was treated at a local hospital. He survived, but had to have both legs amputated at the knee. "48-year-old Charles Cole is being held without bail after strangling his 76-year-old mother to death. His wife, 40-year-old Ronalda Cole, assisted her husband with transporting and disposing of the body. She is now in Dutchess County Jail in South Carolina. Cole allegedly strangled his mother to death for unknown reasons on August 16th while they were living in a motel. He then stuffed the corpse into a plastic bin, and he and his wife lived with the remains for 7 weeks before moving the body to a small South Carolina town. The couple left the bin in a secluded area off of Interstate 95. The hotel manager said there were no indications of the elderly woman being there. He stated, "We never saw her." He went on to say that they had been in the room to check the smoke detectors a half a dozen times, and there was no sign or smell of the dead woman. State police discovered the body on October 17th after relatives asked them to do a wellness check when they couldn't contact her. State Police Captain John Ryan said, "I find it hard to imagine the circumstances that would lead a son to strangle his mother, but also to live with the body in a motel room and then travel several states away to dump her like trash. "24-year-old Megan O'Hara and 19-year-old David Ziskowski allegedly stole a ring and bracelet worth $6,000 from an art gallery in South Florida. They were apprehended at a nearby grocery store after police discovered they had signed the guest book and left a telephone number along with obscene drawings. An unidentified 33-year-old woman was the victim of a violent break-in and assault. A 16-year-old teenager named Antoine Tremaine Miller from North Charleston, South Carolina, is being charged as an adult for criminal sexual conduct, assault, burglary, and weapons possession. Miller forced his way into the victim's home while wielding a knife. He then punched his victim several times and threw her to the floor. Miller then picked up his female victim and carried her to the bedroom, where he then tried to remove her shorts. The woman fought back and kicked her attacker in the groin. Miller then threatened her, saying, "Now you have to die," as he forced his tongue down her mouth. The woman said she bit as hard as she could until she heard it snap. The assailant screamed and fled the scene. He recounted to authorities that the victim still had his tongue in her mouth as he was fleeing, and she spit it onto the floor. The teenager's tongue was recovered by police and placed in ice. The suspect was arrested at a Waffle House after his mother called police claiming her son needed medical attention for a missing tongue. Miller was transported to a hospital along with his tongue, but police refused to say if his tongue had been reattached. Damon Perry, a 23-year-old from New Mexico, was drinking heavily and binge-watching the popular AMC show The Walking Dead with his also 23-year-old friend, Christopher Paquin. They had consumed large amounts of alcohol while watching the show. Perry then claimed that his friend was turning into a zombie and attempted to bite him. So he beat his friend to death using his hands, feet, a guitar, and a microwave. Paquin was pronounced dead at the scene. In San Antonio, Texas, 32-year-old Mercedes Salazar was arrested for abducting and drugging a 25-year-old woman. Salazar believed the woman, who was an ex-girlfriend to her slain brother, had something to do with her brother's death. She enlisted the help of James Serta, Tiana San Nicolas, and Tristan Smith to kidnap the victim and hold her in a San Antonio residence. The 25-year-old victim was tied to a chair and drugged with heroin and an unknown substance that made her pass out. The kidnappers also drew blood from the victim, cut her hair, and performed some sort of a blood ritual, according to police. She had been threatened with a knife and scissors, but was not seriously harmed during the ordeal. The woman managed to call her mother while 3 of the kidnappers were out running errands, and one watching her fell asleep. Police arrived at the home and entered the residence when they heard the woman's screams for help. The investigation into the death of Salazar's brother is ongoing, and the police have not ruled out the ex-girlfriend's involvement. But regardless of the outcome of that investigation, it will not affect the case involving Salazar, who had been arrested 11 times on 43 charges since she was 17 years old. On Friday, the legendary jewel thief, Doris Payne, was arrested again in Atlanta, Georgia, for stealing a $700 pair of earrings from a Saks Fifth Avenue store. She is 85 years old. Payne was wanted for allegedly stealing a $33,000 diamond ring earlier this year. She was apprehended by store security as she attempted to make a hasty exit with the earrings. Atlanta police realized who Mrs. Payne was and issued a statement. They said, "Ms. Payne is a career criminal that had been arrested several times for stealing high-end jewelry." It is believed that Payne has lifted over $2 million in jewels since the 1950s from high-end stores all over the world, from Monte Carlo to Tokyo. At the height of her career, she would use her charm to seduce the clerks into letting their guard down while she made off with the jewels. A documentary was made about her life in 2013, entitled The Life and Crimes of Doris Payne. A movie was also in the works, with Halle Berry to play the lead role of Doris Payne. Doris is unrepentant for her actions. She stated, "I ain't killed nobody. I never took anything I regretted. I had a good look at it and decided this is what I want. And I kept it." On Monday, Hugo Ernesto Castro went to the Santa Clara County Maine jail and confessed to killing his former girlfriend with a knife. He had a note with the whereabouts of the victim's body that he left in an apartment. The deputy took his statement and told Castro it was not their jurisdiction, and he told him to go to San Jose Police Headquarters. Amazingly, Castro walked to the police headquarters and made his confession there. The deputy has been reassigned, and the case is being investigated as to why the deputy did not detain Castro on the spot, which he should have done, instead of letting him simply walk away. 38-year-old Brian OCallaghan is expected to enter a guilty plea for beating his 3-year-old adopted son to death in February of 2014, according to court files. Autopsy reports revealed the special needs child had sustained multiple injuries, including a fracture at the base of the skull, bruises on his forehead, swelling of the brain, and wounds all over his body due to blunt impact. The 3-year-old died on February 3, 2014, 2 days after the alleged beating. OCallaghan has been held since then. OCallaghan was a decorated war hero who was awarded a medal for his contribution in a gun battle during the 2003 Iraq War, which helped to lead to the rescue of captured soldier Jessica Lynch. He was most recently employed as an NSA division chief for China and Korea. Warning: this story involves animal cruelty. Skip ahead to the next story if you are sensitive to acts of violence against animals. Police of Tuscaloosa Police Department were made aware of an unidentified male student from the University of Alabama had posted a video of himself beating his cat with a belt because it threw up on his bed. No arrests have been made as of November 3rd, but police are investigating the crime, which may carry the penalty of a fine of up to $6,000 and imprisonment up to 1 year. 36-year-old Nigel Smith was charged with felony public indecency and assault the week before Halloween in Portland, Oregon. A Spirit of Halloween store customer reported to the store employees that Smith was masturbating in the store while gawking at the pictures of the girls on the sexier Halloween costumes. When male employee confronted Smith, he shoved him and attempted to run. He was tackled and held down by 3 men until the police arrived. Smith bit one of the store employees who tried to detain him. The responding officer said there was a very noticeable wet spot in the front of Smith's gray sweatshorts. Smith claimed the wet spot was sweat. "38-year-old Reynaldo Cardoso Rivera of Houston, Texas, was arrested for killing 34-year-old Darwin Perez Gonzalez with a knife. He became irate when Gonzalez ate the last piece of chicken at dinner. So, of course, Cardoso had to stab and kill the man with a knife. Weatherford police were called by a man to do a welfare check on his estranged pregnant wife in her Texas home on Tuesday, November 2nd. 22-year-old Ashley Nicole Blades had texted her husband that she had given birth to the baby, but it died. When officers arrived at her home, she told them the dead baby was in the trunk of her Ford Focus. They found the baby wrapped in a towel and placed in a plastic bag. Police immediately detained Blades. She admitted to police that she had given birth in her parents' home, where she lived, and covered the baby's mouth for a minute or two to get it to stop crying. After that, it just wasn't the same, and she found it dead a little while later. Blade's parents were unaware that she had given birth. She had been booked and faces capital murder charges and abuse of a corpse. Several reports of needles and razor blades found in Halloween candy given out to trick-or-treaters were made all across the country this year. In a suburb of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Kennett Square Police Department had 5 accounts of needles being found in Twix and Snicker bars, candy given to 4 different children, all being under 12 years old. A needle was found in central Minnesota. A piece of a disposable razor blade was found in West Virginia, reported Tyler County Sheriff's Office. Ohio police also reported a piece of a razor blade found in a young girl's candy. A report from Auburn, Massachusetts, which quickly went viral, was later determined to be a hoax, according to the police there. The beginning of such deplorable actions may be traced back to Ronald O'Brien of Deer Park, Texas. He was arrested in 1975 after his 8-year-old son, Timothy O'Brien, died from eating candy that was laced with cyanide. O'Brien himself committed the murder to collect the life insurance on his own boy. He was nicknamed the Candy Man by fellow inmates. O'Brien was executed by lethal injection in 1984. He is since remembered as the man who killed Halloween. It is because of him that we now have to check our kids' candy and closely monitor activities on Halloween.